everyone, or potentially just Norman. Welcome, Norman. I just thought of an idea um, as I was hopping on. So give me a second to enact it. Of course. There we go. My keyboard messed. Oh, thank you. There we go. My keyboard messed me up, but hopefully people saw that. Um, you hear nothing. Okay, how about now? Do you hear something now? I had the. There's a voice. Is it a quiet voice or a normal voice? You can hear again, but still very quiet. This calls for me listening to myself. I did a practice one today, and the practice one sounded fine. So I don't know what would be causing this. I mean, could it be as simple as this? Am I less quiet now? Do. Yeah. I have to sit through ads because I'm on the. I prefer the term anti-hero account on my phone. Okay, play. Hello? Yeah, a bit quiet. What happens when I do that? Is that better? Hello? Okay. Let's try it this way. Does this change anything? Quiet like you can barely hear me quiet. How about that? Does that do anything? That seems better for me. And that seems better for Death's Head too. If I am still quiet to you, Mako, it might be something on your end. um. Okay, then that's turned up a little bit. Okay, that's better for you too. Good. It might literally be me. Um, because I am very tired today. I had a lovely visit with my guests. It was absolutely wonderful, but as an introvert, it is stressful to have guests over, and so and then we had a kind of a different morning. We were doing different stuff than we usually would, partially because of that this morning, and so I'm just kind of tired and stressed. I wanted to do, oh gosh, my volume slider's in the red. My phone thinks my hearing's in danger. That's not good. But what was I saying? Oh, I wanted to do something bigger and wackier, because I'm gonna be minus two streams this month, or last of this month and next of next month, which would be better in that case, but still. And so I wanted to do a stream that people would cheer for, but I don't really have the energy to do what I was suggesting of like the switch stuff up thing. I just need to stick with something mellow. If you guys would be willing to cheer just to support me, or if you, I don't know, if you want to, I guess you could say, like, do this voice or something like that for one of the characters. But if you just want to cheer to support me, I would greatly appreciate that. There's a chance I might be able to do something more fun on Monday, but there are no guarantees. Aw, you guys. Thank you so much. Wow, I am really in some type of mood because that's putting tears in my eyes. And that already got you a hype train. Thank you so much. But yeah, so it's just gonna be a mellow stream where we read some Pride and Prejudice. We will be starting volume 2 today. I didn't even realize that there were multiple volumes, but we will be starting volume 2. I finished a chapter last time and it was like, oh, end of volume 1. Thank you so much, Mako. I really appreciate that. Hype train addiction kicking in and trying to chug it along. Wonderful. Yeah, so last time we had quite the twist, which is that Charlotte Lucas, who I was confused on if she was the Lucas mom or a daughter. She is a daughter. And I believe that she is indeed Lizzie's friend, like around her age, her friend. I was confused about that. So Charlotte Lucas was, when Elizabeth rejected Mr. Collins, Charlotte Lucas was entertaining him, was talking to him, and I was kind of sitting there being like, wow, taking one for the team, Charlotte, entertaining him so that nobody else has to. That's great. And turns out she had other plans. She wanted to marry him. Not because she likes him in any way, even as a friend. Not because she likes him, but because she doesn't want to be destitute, and she needs a husband to not be sleeping either on a rope or in a coffin, presumably. In more ways than one, I guess. Which is very sad. Wow. You chugged it along and now there's another hype train. Thank you so much, Mako. I really appreciate that. Yes, so she was hanging out with him, I think because she realized he was the kind of person who would fall for the next lady who gave him attention, and lo and behold, that is what happened. And yeah, he ran over to her house in the middle of the night and proposed to her, and now the Lucases are like, I wonder when Mr. Bennet's gonna die, 'cause that's our house now. And it's like, And all the Bennets are like, you were our friends, but we don't really think so anymore. And Mr. Bingley went to London. Mr. Bingley Goes to London. Reminds me of the Dracula Goes to London cartoon idea. Everybody's going to London. So yeah, he went there with his two sisters, and one of them sent, I was about to say Kate, Jane sent Jane a letter saying, yeah, he's probably gonna marry Mr. Darcy's sister. I think, I would love to still be friends with you, but I think you're out of the picture. I'd love to continue being friends with you. Not really. But so, and then Jane was kind of affected by that. She was very sad. But Elizabeth kind of looks at the letter and wrinkles her nose and is like, excuse me. Whatever his sisters are plotting doesn't mean he's actually gonna go through with it. Everybody can clearly see that you guys love each other. You are the gal for him. And so yeah, you are the gal for him, and I don't think that's gonna change. I don't think that a month in London or whatever is gonna be an issue. I think they said that he was gonna be away the whole winter, and I believe that that's why we had to cut off for volume 1. I believe we're going to probably pick up with him coming back because there's less to discuss over the winter. At least that's my prediction. But we will see how things go. And let us begin with volume 2. I don't like that the camera. So, if you'll recall, last time there was a little camera issues because of the direction it was facing, and so I made it face the right direction now. So hopefully we won't have those issues anymore. But it does mean that you're gonna get a shadow. So yes, I mean I don't know if this helps. I guess that does help. Do you prefer that? There is daylight outside, and so I don't know if this is better with here. Let's go to an actual page. I don't know if this is better, less shadow with the reading light, or this is better with just the daylight but with more of a shadow. Do you have a vote? I guess I will start reading, and you guys can vote in the chat. Oop! I usually make this bigger. That's not bigger. Reading light seemed better. Okay. Oh yeah, up close it's especially better. Okie dokie. Haha. Oh yes, that was the other thing, is that all that Jane got was this letter from his sister. She wasn't getting any letter from him or from anybody else, and so yeah. Oh, I now have to remember. So this is chapter 24. So it says 1. It's 1 of volume 2. So chapter 24 of the whole book. Chapter 24. Miss Bingley's letter arrived and put an end to doubt. The very first sentence conveyed the assurance of their being all settled in London for the winter, and concluded with her brother's regret at not having had time to pay his respects to his friends in Hertfordshire before he left the country. Wait, so was I 100% wrong? Like, are we literally picking up right as we left off, and we're still, like, the winter has not passed, he's still away. What happened? There's another hype train, it seems like. I didn't see another cheer, but that's lovely. Alright. Hope was over, entirely over. That's a fun phrasing, that instead of like, my hopes were dashed or something like that. It's like, hope is over. We are over with hope. Hope was over, entirely over, when Jane could attend to the rest of the letter. She found little except the professional affectation of the writer that could give her any comfort. Miss Darcy's praise occupied the chief of it. Her many attractions were again dwelt on, and Caroline boasted joyfully of their increasing intimacy, and ventured to predict the accomplishment of the wishes which had unfolded in her former letter. She wrote also with great pleasure of her brother's being an inmate of Mr. Darcy's house, and mentioned with rapture some plans of the latter with regard to new future. That's again, these phrasings that sound normal at the time but don't now. It's like, yeah, she's an inmate of Mr. Darcy's house. It's like, we are all prisoners here at Mr. Darcy's house. I feel like other people would think that, but not her. And why are we getting no letters from Mr. Bingley? Like, I feel like that's something that should be questioned. That I guess either the fact that we're not getting letters from Mr. Bingley should be a clue that she is right. So that, like, yeah, if he really did love Jane, he would have written to her. Or it's a clue that this is all a ruse. That, you know, maybe Miss Bingley put some, put something in Mr. Bingley's head of like, oh, Jane doesn't like you or something like that, and so he's mad at her, but Jane doesn't even know what she did because she didn't do anything, something like that. You know, we're only hearing from Miss Bingley, and whatever is going on, it's a clue to something. It's not normal. Let's see, where was I? Elizabeth, to whom Jane very soon communicated the chief of all this, heard it in silent indignation. Me and you too, sis. Her heart was divided between concern for her sister and resentment against all the others. I love that. That is a great way to phrase it. Yes, I care about my sister very much. And I am furious at everybody else in this situation. I guess that's not really a, well, I was gonna say it's not really a divided, because it's like the same thought. I love my sister, and I hate that Miss Bingley's doing this to her. But I guess it's just that she's divided between two emotions. To Caroline's assertion of her brothers being partial to Miss Darcy, she paid no credit. That he was really fond of Jane, she doubted no more than she had ever done, and much as she... Can I read it like this? Not really. Had always been disposed to like him, she could not think without anger, hardly without contempt, on that easiness of temper, the want of resolution, which now made him the slave of his designing friends. Wait, what? So... Okay, so she does like Mr. Bingley. No prejudice against him. She couldn't think without anger, hardly without contempt. That's fun. I like that phrasing. On that easiness of temper, that want of proper resolution, which now made him the slave of his designing friends, and led him to sacrifice his own happiness to the caprice of their inclinations. Okay, so I was confused because it said anger, contempt, and then temper next to each other, and I thought it was the same thought, but we were on to a new thought, which is, okay, Mr. Bingley has an easiness, like it, just in his personality, that he wants to please people. So he wants to please his sisters or his friends, and they're like, yeah, let's go to London. And he's like, sure, we can go to London. And she's frustrated with that. I think that's what it's saying. Had his own happiness, however, been the only sacrifice, he might have been allowed to sport with it in whatever manner he thought best. But her sister's was involved in it, as she thought he must be sensible himself. It was a subject, in short, on which reflection would be long indulged, and must be unavailing. She could think of nothing else, and yet whether Bingley's regard had really died away, or were suppressed by his friend's interference, whether he had been aware of Jane's attachment, or whether it had escaped his observation, whichever were the case, though her opinion of him must be materially affected by the difference, her sister's situation remained the same, her peace equally wounded. Okay, so I'll read this to myself, but I think it's saying, like, she doesn't really know what's going on with him and what all he knows, what all he thinks. Regardless of what he thinks, Jane is in the same position, because she has no information, and she's not going to get it, seemingly. I do like this idea of, like, oh, if this was just about his happiness and he sacrificed his happiness to please others, that's fine. But you dragged my sister into this and her happiness, so that's not okay. Okay, whether Bingley's regard had really died away, so whether Caroline's right, or was suppressed by his friends or interference, so suppressed because Caroline wants him to go, or if he's been aware that Jane likes him, or he doesn't know whether he likes her or not. Yeah, so he might. So she's conceding, there is a chance that maybe I'm wrong. There is a chance that maybe he doesn't like her. Maybe he didn't realize that she liked him. And regardless of what the situation is, Jane is still in the same position, and that really sucks, which is fair. A day or two passed before Jane had courage to speak of her feelings to Elizabeth, but at last, on Mrs. Bennet's leaving them together, after a longer irritation than usual about Netherfield and its master, she could not help but saying, so is this Elizabeth or Jane talking? I think it's Jane. Oh, that my dear mother had more command over herself. She can have no idea of the pain she gives me by her continual reflections on him. But I will not repine. I I cannot last long. He will be forgot, and we shall all be as we were before." Elizabeth looked at her sister with incredulous solicitude, but said nothing. "You doubt me," cried Jane, slightly colouring. "Indeed, you have no reason. He may live in my memory as the most amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all. He may live in my memory as the most perfect man to ever walk this earth, but that's it." Aw, poor Jane. I want to look up, so what does repine mean? Does that mean, like, respite? Sorry for the noises outside. That is my dad moving the treadmill. The broken treadmill that needs to go. Okay, it means to complain. Okay, I won't complain. Okay, yeah, this is probably the most complaining we've heard out of Jane this whole book so far. She's very composed. I have nothing either to hope or fear, and nothing to reproach him with. Thank God, I have not that pain. A little time, therefore. I shall certainly try to get the better. So she hasn't heard anything from him, so she can't, reproach him with anything. And I guess it's also saying, like, I can't find any faults in him, so I can't insult him and be like, well, I'm better off without him because of this. But I don't know why her next line is, I have not that pain. I don't know. With a stronger voice, she soon added, I have this comfort immediately, that it has not been more than any error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself. I mean, Elizabeth is pretty tiffed. I don't know if you could call that harm. My dear Jane, exclaimed Elizabeth, you are too good. Your sweetness and disinterestedness are really angelic. I do not know what to say to you. I feel as if I had never done you justice, or loved you as you deserve. Fair enough. Miss Bennet equally disclaimed all extraordinary merit, and threw back the praise on her sister's warm affection. Once again, I started this going, I guess, they're in the room with Mrs. Bennet. And then as she kept talking and Mrs. Bennet was not saying anything, I was like, I guess she's just venting to Elizabeth. And now she is here! Oh, nope. Happened again. It's Miss Bennet. This is my single biggest annoyance with this book. Not just, the more general biggest annoyance of this book is that I don't know who's talking and B, who's in the room. But the more specific annoyance is this singular phrase of Miss Bennet. One, because it's easy to misread as Mrs. Bennet, and two, because there's 5 Miss Bennets. Even when there's only 2 in the room, it still confuses me on who it's talking about. So I guess it's saying Jane, that Elizabeth just said something about Jane, so I guess the Miss Bennet in this case is Jane. So Miss Bennet eagerly disclaimed all extraordinary merit and threw back the praise on her sister's warm affection. Okay, that makes more sense. Nay, said Elizabeth, that is not fair. You wish to think all the world respectable, and are hurt if I speak ill of anybody. I only want to think you perfect, and you set yourself against it. Do not be afraid of my running into any excess, of my encroaching on your privilege of universal goodwill. You need not. There are few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters, and of the little dependence that can be placed on the appearance of either merit or sense. I have met with 2 instances lately. One I will not mention, the other Charlotte's marriage. It is unaccountable. In every view it is unaccountable. Oh, I really liked that little speech there. So that I really like that beginning of, like, you think everybody's perfect. You never want to speak ill of anybody. But I think ill of everybody. I'm always, mistrusting people and thinking the worst in people. There's only one person that I want to think is perfect, and that's you. I don't know if that's exactly a trope, but if that is, I love that trope. I kind of use that with Savion and Lestaire. And, like, I mean, it also makes me think of, like, William and Lewis in Moriarty the Patriot, like, when they talk early on, and they're both saying, like, how do I phrase this? that they're both saying, if at the end of this plan, one of us dies or both of us die, like, neither of us really want to be in this world without the other, kind of thing. William thinks of Lewis as being, this pure, uncorrupted soul who shouldn't go down with the rest of them. And Lewis is like, nah, fam. I'm not a pure, uncorrupted soul. Actually, I think Lewis, in some ways, is the most corrupted of the brothers. And so, I really like that idea of, like, somebody who thinks ill of everybody else, but not this one person, and bonus points if it's a sibling. And then, let's see. There are a few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. I really like that sentence too. I think that's a great insight into her character of, like, yeah, when I love something, I really love something, and there are a few that I love in the way that I love you, and even then, below that is the bar of somebody I think well, and there are fewer people that I think well of. Almost saying, like, there are people I love who I don't think well of, like, potentially, like, her mom, who she loves but maybe doesn't think super well of. So I think that's a neat little thing. And also could potentially be a similarity that she has with Mr. Darcy. It reminds me of them talking about the grudge thing, that, like, when he has a grudge, he doesn't let go of it very easily. And so it seems like kind of a similar but reverse thing here, where it's like, when I love something, I don't let it go. I mean, it's on his side. I don't make grudges easily, but when I make them, I keep them. And then on her side, it's I don't love easily, but when I love, I love deeply. I don't let go. So I think that's really neat. And the more I see of the world, the more I'm dissatisfied with it. Same. That is also a mood. Hold on a sec. Okay, I put the cats up in my room while my dad's working on this treadmill situation, and I thought I heard a meow, and I was like, I should not be hearing a meow. So I guess it was just a ding of what he's doing that sounded meowish. Oh, it was over here. But I like that word of dissatisfied, that it's not like, oh, I think the world sucks, or I think the worst of the world. It's just like, you know what? I'm not satisfied with this place. And that feels true and relatable, and I like that. And it's interesting because it feels more, I guess, realistic than pessimistic. It is a bit pessimistic, but again, it's not saying, yeah, well, everything sucks, the entire world sucks, you're the only good thing in it. It's just like, I'm just not satisfied. This place ain't satisfying. Every day confirms my belief the inconsistency of all human characters. Yes, very true. Also enjoy that little tidbit. Little dependence that can be placed on the appearance or either merit of sense. I guess is just saying, like, you can't put much faith on how people appear. Which, note about Mr. Darcy. And then I'm curious if her not mentioning the other means that we as the audience don't know about it, or if it means Mr. Wickham, or if it means her own, her saying no to Mr. Collins. I'm not sure. My dear Lizzie, do not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness, and do not make allowance enough for difference of situation and temper. Well, I mean, she was saying that people are inconsistent, and that is a difference of situation and temper. But I guess Lizzie is saying it's not okay that people are different, that people are inconsistent, and Jane is saying, well, people are gonna have situations and moods and stuff, and that's okay. Consider Mr. Collins's respectability and Charlotte's prudent, steady character. Remember that she is one of a large family, that as to fortune, it is a most eligible match, and be ready to believe, for everybody's sake, that she may feel something like regard or esteem for our cousin. Maybe. Unlikely. I don't think so. Actually, I think she has little esteem for him because she knows she could manipulate him. I oblige you. I would try to believe almost anything, but no one else could be benefited by such a belief as this. For were I persuaded that Charlotte had any regard for him, I should only think worse of her understanding than I now do of her heart. Interesting. My dear Jane, Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man. You know he is as well as I do, and you must feel as well as I do that the woman who marries him cannot have a proper way of thinking. You shall not defend her, though it is Charlotte Lucas. You shall not, for the sake of one individual, change the meaning of principle and integrity, nor endeavor to persuade yourself or me that selfishness is prudence, and insensibility of danger security for happiness. Lizzie, you are just spitting fire today. So I like that phrasing of I should only think worse for understanding than I now do of her heart. That's a neat little juxtaposition there. But I think she's saying, like, I guess she thinks that she does love him, which is odd but interesting. So she thinks, oh, like I think ill of her heart. I think ill of her, loving him. But if she, like, actually respects him as a human being, then I think worse of her mind. I think, she may have lost a marble. And I love the conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man. He's a silly man. Again, with the lovely old phrasings that I'm sure silly was more insulting at the time, but now it's very tame and cute, and so it's just like, let's see, where conceited, yep, pompous, yep, narrow-minded, yep, silly man. It sounds like in the I'm trying to think of another comparison to that, where it's like you're giving a scathing insult and it's like every word is like hitting really hard, and then you throw one in there that's just like that didn't seem right. Now I'm not thinking of the more insulting ones, but I guess it would be just like something like, yeah, he's conceited, he's arrogant, pompous, narrow-minded, he's a silly little bingus, It's a little more than a silly little bingus. Anyways, any woman who marries him cannot have a proper way of thinking. Yeah, that's fair, Lizzie. That is fair. And then also fair, like, hey, I know you're trying to, like, be nice because you're nice about everybody, but you can't change what, like, your entire worldview to make this make sense. You can't, change your view of what, like, integrity means, because you want to defend Charlotte. So, like, you have to admit, they are silly little binguses. they are silly little binguses who are gonna be together forever. Uh, Silly feels really light when we can throw around daft bastard. Yes, exactly. That would work so much better. So, Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, daft bastard. Yes, that would hit so much harder than silly man. Let's see. And then I like that she throws in an insensibility to danger there. I mean, I don't know if that means that I should be, chuckling at this less, but, I didn't really think she was in danger of him, just that, she's not gonna be happy with him, and that's not fun. But that is interesting that she puts that in there. It's like her danger, meter should be going off. Her dangerometer should be going off. I must think your language too strong in speaking of I'm with you for a conceited, pompous, and narrow-minded, but when you threw that silly in there, that you crossed a line, Lizzie. I must think your language too strong in speaking of both, replied Jane, and I hope you will be convinced of it by seeing them happy together. But enough of this. You alluded to something else. You mentioned 2 instances. Aha! Jane picked up on it. Wonderful. I cannot misunderstand you, but I entreat you, dear Lizzie, not to pain me by thinking that person to blame, and saying your opinion of him is sunk. We must not be so ready to fancy ourselves intentionally injured. We must not expect a lively young man to be always so guarded and circumspect. It is very often nothing but our own vanity that deceives us. Women fancy admiration means more than it does. I feel like I'm a little lost. I don't know if she's talking about actually, the letters with Bingley. If she's saying, hey, have you made your judgment on Bingley? Do you now think he's a bad person? Because we're not ready to make that judgment. But I didn't think Elizabeth was ready to make that judgment either. She was actually barely conceding, maybe he's lost interest in her, but I don't think so. It could be Wickham and Darcy, but I think they talk about that more openly, so I'm not quite sure who that person is. And she also says opinion of him is sunk, and so it wouldn't be... Darcy could not be that person, so it would have to be Bingley or Wickham, I think. We must not expect a lively young man to be always so guarded and circumspect. And then that's the part that also confuses me, because Bingley I don't think is guarded or circumspect. He is lively, though. I guess maybe she's saying, he is a very lively young man, and so you can't expect him to... I don't know if he's super smart. I don't know if he realizes that, because she's talking about admiration, so maybe she's saying, I admire him, and maybe he didn't realize it. Maybe he didn't, he wasn't thinking hard enough about it. I guess. Women fancy admiration means more than it does, and men take care that they should. I don't... That phrasing doesn't seem to mirror. I don't get it. I guess, men don't care that they should fancy admiration means more than it does, maybe? If it is designedly done, they cannot be justified. But I have no idea of there being so much design in the world as some persons imagine. So she's saying there's a lot of coincidences going on here. That it's not... Everything isn't malicious or designed. I am far from attributing any part of Mr. Bingley's conduct to design. Okay, so, yes, we were talking about Mr. Bingley. All right, said Elizabeth. But without scheming to do wrong or to make others unhappy, there may be error, and there may be misery. Thoughtlessness, want of attention to other people's feelings, and want of resolution will do the business. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I've been there before, where it's I care about other people's feelings at the expense of my own, kind of thing. And do you impute either of those? Yes, to the last. But if I go on, I shall displease you by saying what I think of persons you esteem. Stop me whilst you can. Interesting. You persist, then, in supporting his sisters influence him? What? Elizabeth's saying the opposite. She's saying, like, it sounds like to me what's going on is, like, she's saying, hey, lawlessness, want of attention to other people's feelings, and want of resolution, that's want of resolution. I didn't talk about that, but yeah, I've been there before too. That's a similar but different thing that I very much relate to. But and so Jane's like, well, caring about other people's feelings and wanting a resolution, neither of those things is bad. And then Elizabeth is like, actually, I think they are bad. Where is this? There it is. And so then she's saying you persist in supposing. Oh, not supporting, supposing. Okay. You persist then in supposing his sisters influence him. Yes, in conjunction with his friend. Oh, that's why she kept using the word friend. I was wondering why she used friend, because I was like, this is his sister's. It's because she's pinning this on Darcy. That's so funny. I guess it makes sense because it is his sister, and so she might be like, he really wants him to marry his sister. But like this seems way more on Caroline. Let's see. Yes, in conjunction with his friend. I cannot believe it. Why should they try to influence him? They can only wish his happiness, and if he is attached to me, no other woman can secure it. Oh, Jane, you sweet summer child. They should only wish for his happiness, but they care about their own happiness more than his. Your first position is false. They may wish many things besides his happiness. They may wish his increase of wealth in consequence. They may wish him to marry a girl who has all the importance of money, great connections, and pride. True, I think it's more about them, but yeah. Beyond a doubt, they do wish him to choose Miss Darcy, replied Jane. But this may be from better feelings than you are supposing. They have known her much longer than they have known me. No wonder if they love her better. But whatever may be their own wishes, it is very unlikely they should have opposed their brothers. What sister would think herself at liberty to do it, unless there were something very objectionable? If they believed him attached to me, they would not try to part us. If he were so, they could not succeed. By supposing such an affection, you make everybody acting unnaturally and wrong. And me most unhappy. Do not distress me by the idea. I'm not ashamed of having been mistaken, or at least it is slight. It is nothing in comparison of what I should feel in thinking ill of him or his sisters. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. Oh, Jane, you're just so sweet. Like, I knew she was sweet, but I didn't really realize quite how naive she could be. And like, wait, go back. Yeah, it's like, oh, if he loved me, they wouldn't try to break us up, and they would just be happy for their brother. It's like, no, Jane, that is, I wish that's how the world worked, but that isn't how the world always works. And she's saying, no, I thought he liked me, but clearly I'm the one who was wrong. And it's like, no, Jane. No, that's not what's going on here. Elizabeth could not oppose such a wish, and from this time Mr. Bingley's name was scarcely ever mentioned between them. Ah, stick to your guns, Elizabeth. I mean, I know you're respecting her wishes, but come on. I guess it's because, I mean, it is interesting that they're using these phrasings of happiness, and so I think that I think that probably what got her was her saying, you're making me unhappy, and it's like, okay, well, I'm only trying to make you happy, and so if I'm making you unhappy by fighting it, then I'll back down. Mrs. Bennet still continued to wonder and repine at his returning no more, and though a day seldom passed in which Elizabeth did not account for it clearly, there seemed little chance of her ever considering it with less perplexity. Her daughter endeavoured to convince her of what she did not believe herself, that his attentions to Jane had been merely the effect of a common and transient liking, which ceased when he saw her no more. But though the probability that the statement was admitted at the time, she had the same story to repeat every day. Mrs. Bennet's best comfort was that Mr. Bingley must be down again in the summer. Hang on a sec. I see. Okay, so Elizabeth is trying to convince her mom that, hey, yeah, maybe he liked her, but now that he's not with her, it's not lasting. Even though she doesn't believe that, she's trying to get her mom off Jane's back. That's fair. Mr. Bennet treated the matter differently. "So, Lizzie," said he one day, "your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed in love a little now and then. It is something to think of, and gives her a sort of distinction among her companions. When is your turn to come? You'll hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane. Now is your time. Here are officers enough at Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country." What? You're officers enough at Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country. Let Wickham be your man. He is a pleasant fellow, and would jilt you creditably? I thought it said creditability, and I was like, what? He's a pleasant fellow and would jilt you creditably. Okay, so I get with the disappointed thing, man. I thought he was saying there are lots of officers that you could marry and later be disappointed by. But no, he's saying that, like, once Wickham marries you, he's gonna disappoint everybody else. But that's cute. I like that he's like, look at that Jane, she's in love, ain't that cute? When's your time, Elizabeth? I'd love to see you in love. You're my favorite daughter. And cute that he is approving of Wickham, who she does like. We know that he's not going to be the man for her, but in the end. But for now, he is the one that she likes. Which I am curious how that's going to fall apart, or if he is a great guy and he's not going to be like proved to be a scoundrel in any way. She's just going to be like, think I actually like Darcy, kind of thing. But very curious when that's gonna happen. Thank you, sir, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune. Oh, so she's like, oh, I do like Wickham, but you know, I could settle for something less. Like, he's the best. I understand if you want somebody else. And I guess it also speaks to Mr. Bennet being like, no, only the best for you, Lizzie. True, said Mr. Bennet, but it is a comfort to think that whatever of that kind may befall you, you have an affectionate mother who will always make the most of it. That is true. She did make the most of Collins. Mr. Wickham's society was of material service in dispelling the gloom, which the late perverse occurrences had thrown on many of the Longbourn family. Wait, what? Mr. Wickham's society, okay, so they're hanging out with Wickham, was of material service in dispelling the gloom. Yes, gloom that Collins brought, which the late perverse occurrences had thrown on many of the Longbourn family. Okay, so it's just the late perverse occurrences are Collins. He threw gloom on them. Okay. They saw him often, and to his other recommendations was now added that of general unreserve. The whole of what Elizabeth had already heard, his claims on Mr. Darcy, and all that he had suffered from him, was now openly acknowledged and publicly canvassed, and everybody was pleased to think how much they had always disliked Mr. Darcy before they had known anything of the matter. Oh boy! So everybody's like, Wickham's, troubles are coming to light, and everybody's like, I never liked him. I think there's more to the story, guys. I think there is. Miss Bennet was the only creature who could suppose there might be any extenuating circumstances in the case, unknown to the Society of Hertfordshire. Her mild and steady candor always pleaded for allowances, and urged the possibility of mistakes. But by everybody else, Mr. Darcy was condemned as the worst of men. We've got someone on well, maybe not on his side, but somebody willing to see that there might be circumstances. Good job, Jane. Jane is interesting because that is the, I guess that is the situation, which is that when you have that kind of view of people, that it can make you naive and it can make you, maybe easily manipulated, but it also means that in situations like this, presuming I'm right, and he does have reasons for what he did, it means that you're seeing the best in people and you can be right and in those situations, and you can potentially really help somebody out by, doing that. All right. Let us continue. Chapter 25. After a week spent in professions of love and schemes of felicity, Mr. Collins was called from his amiable Charlotte by the arrival of Saturday. Oh, Mr. Collins, we had one chapter away from you. I was hoping for more. The pain of separation, however, might be alleviated on his side by preparation for the reception of his bride, as he had reason to hope that shortly after his next return to Hertfordshire, the day would be fixed that was to make him the happiest of men. They really use that phrase a lot. I don't know if it's a specific Collins thing or if they're going to use it with other marriages. He took leave of his relations at Longbourn with as much solemnity as before, wished his fair cousins health and happiness again, and promised their father another letter of thanks. Okay, so he is leaving. Yay! On the following Monday, Mrs. Bennet had the pleasure of receiving her brother and his wife, who came as usual to spend the Christmas at Longbourn. So I think this is Mrs. Bennet's brother. Mr. Gardiner was a sensible, gentlemanlike man, and greatly superior to his sister, as well by nature as education. Wow, just, throwing it out there that he's better than Mrs. Bennet. Hello, Decoy. Good evening, all. I hope you've read up on your etiquette. Yes, indeed. Great to have you here. Hey, you are purple in the chat. Very cool. The Netherfield ladies, who would have had difficulty in believing that a man who lived by trade and within view of his own warehouses could have been so well-bred and agreeable. Wait, so are they saying that, traders, are not respectable people at this time? That's curious. Mrs. Gardiner, who was several years younger than Mrs. Bennet and Mrs. Phillips, was an amiable, intelligent, elegant woman, and a great favourite with all her Longbourn nieces. Between the two eldest and herself especially, there subsisted a very peculiar regard. They had frequently been staying with her in town. So I guess that's like when Lydia and Kitty go into town, they stay with her. The first part of Mrs. Gardiner's business on her arrival was to distribute her presents and describe the newest fashions. I mean, come on, man. If your aunt comes into your house bearing gifts, yeah, she's gonna be the favorite aunt. When this was done, she had a less active part to play. It became her turn to listen. Mrs. Bennet had many grievances to relate, and much to complain of. That's just Mrs. Bennet all the time. They've been very ill-used since she last saw her sister. Two of her girls had been on the point of marriage, and after all, there was nothing in it. Yeah, that does make sense, that Mrs. Bennet, even though she usually complains, maybe she does actually have something to complain about here. I do not blame Jane, she continued, for Jane would have got Mr. Bingley if she could. But Lizzie, oh sister, it is very hard to think that she might have been Mr. Collins's wife by this time, had not it been for her own perverseness. He made her an offer in this very room, and she refused him. The consequence of it is that Lady Lucas will have a daughter married before I have, and that Longbourn estate is just as much entailed as ever. The Lucases are very artful people indeed, sister. They are all for what they can get. Okay. I'm sorry to say it of them, but so it is. It makes me very nervous and poorly to be thwarted so in my own family, and to have neighbours who think of themselves before anybody else. However, your coming just at this time is the greatest of comforts, and I am very glad to hear that what you tell us of long sleeves. I guess that's a fashion thing, but just throwing that at the end of this is just like, oh my gosh, I was gonna have 2 daughters married, and then one of them refused in this very room. Thank you for talking about long sleeves. It warms my heart. I too am warmed by the thought of long sleeves. Oh my goodness. I guess it's just the specificity of it. If it was like what you tell us of fashion, I'd probably be like, okay, but long sleeves. Oh boy. It's interesting that she's like, oh, I don't blame Jane, but like, I guess she's saying like, it's not Jane's fault, but it is Lizzie's fault. And then, again, like, this one makes more sense, but, you know, one of the different meanings then to now. Because perverseness, you know, usually would mean something different. It's just like, oh, she's being, at least it means stubborn, I think, if not more than that. But, you know, it just kind of sounds like she's calling her daughter a pervert for not marrying a pervert, and that's kind of funny. Also, I think that's like one of the first mentions that we've had of an actual room, an actual setting. Wow, we're in a room? She proposed in this room? Wow. Wish I knew what this room was. What was in it, what it looked like. And then it also seems like it's a competition. It's like, the Lucases are gonna have a daughter married before me. I guess it was at the time, but that's also kind of funny. It makes me think of like that episode of Bluey, which is more heartfelt, but where they're talking about like, you know, that there is like this that one of the other moms in like the local mom group, like her daughter was walking first, and then I'm not remembering their names, but Chili, is that her name? Chili, and Bingo, is that their names? Yeah, if that is their names, like Bingo wasn't walking as soon as this other lady's daughter, and so she felt like this was a competition, and then it ended on this like very sweet note where it's like, hey, being a mom is not a competition. Like, it's okay that, you know, your daughters go at different paces, and Bingo's gonna be better at other things and that kind of thing. So it makes me think of that, but I don't think they're gonna address it. I think it's just funny. Yeah. A room? Wow, so much detail. No wonder it's a classic. Amazing. I have been told that we're in a room, guys. Oh, there's an ad break, so I guess maybe I'll pause. I don't have kitties in here to show you, but and they're artful people. I think she is saying like they're crafty. They're crafty people. Also, I was gonna say regarding this as well that I don't believe it's been mentioned that the Lucases have a lot of kids, as evidenced by the fact that I didn't even know they had one kid. I was like, okay, is Charlotte Lucas the mom or the daughter? Because I don't believe it's been mentioned that they had a daughter. And now they're like, well, it makes sense because they have a lot of kids. It's like, mention them! Tell me they have a lot of kids! Because I didn't know they had any! back, everybody. Okay, oh yeah, the long sleeves. Mrs. Gardiner, to whom the chief of this news had been given before, in the course of Jane Elizabeth's correspondence with her, made her sister a slight answer, and in compassion to her nieces turned the conversation. Ah, that's nice. When alone with Elizabeth afterwards, she spoke more on the subject. It seems likely to have been a desirable match for Jane, said she. I'm sorry it went off. But these things happen so often. A young man such as you describe, Mr. Bingley, so easily falls in love with a pretty girl for a few weeks, and when accident separates them, so easily forgets her, that these sorts of inconsistencies are very frequent. An excellent consolation in its way, said Elizabeth. that's I don't know if this is exactly what it means, but it sounds like she's saying that's a great get well card, friend. That's a great get well card, Auntie. That's a great way to console us. Oh, okay. I needed to keep reading the sentence. Now it makes more sense. All right. An excellent consolation in its way, said Elizabeth, but it will not do for us. We do not suffer by accident. It does not often happen that the interference of friends will persuade a young man of independent fortune to think no more of a girl whom he was violently in love with only a few days before. It's extra funny now hearing her say friends that it just feels like she is like ignoring the sisters and it's just like it does not often happen that the interference of friends, Mr. Darcy, will persuade you. But that expression of violently in love is so hackneyed, so doubtful, so indefinite that it gives me very little idea. What's indefinite about that? That actually is very definite to say violently in love. Pretty clear to me. It is as often applied to feelings which rise from a half-hour's acquaintance to a real strong attachment. Pray, how violent was Mr. Bingley's love? Oh, interesting. Okay, so we mentioned this with Mr. Collins, that he like used the phrase of the violence of my affections, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that phrasing. But I guess maybe this is a common phrase back then to say that your affections are violent, and to the extent where you'll say that about a crush, like a 10-minute crush, as easily as you'll say it of somebody you've been together with for decades. I never saw a more promising inclination. He was growing quite inattentive to other people, and wholly engrossed by her. Every time they met, it was more decided and remarkable. At his own ball, he offended 2 or 3 young ladies by not asking them to dance, and I spoke to him twice myself, without receiving an answer. Could there be finer symptoms? Is not general incivility the very essence of love? Oh, that's funny. Like, being incivil to other people, it shows you're in love. Is not general incivility the very essence of love? Oh, yes. Of that kind of love which I suppose him to have felt. Poor Jane. I am sorry for her, because with her disposition, she may not get over it immediately. I mean, would anybody get over it immediately? I guess especially she wouldn't, because she's so sweet and like, perhaps feels things very deeply. But I don't think anybody's just gonna get over a violent affection that easily. It had better have happened to you, Lizzie. You would have laughed yourself out of it sooner. I guess that's fair. I guess that's true. But do you think she would have prevailed on to go back with us? Change of scene might be of service, and perhaps a little relief from home may be as useful as anything. Good point. I think she doesn't really want to be around her mom right now, and she's just kind of sitting by the fire being sad. So, yeah, maybe she should get out of the house. Elizabeth was exceedingly pleased with this proposal and felt persuaded of her sister's ready acquiescence. I hope, added Mrs. Gardiner, that no consideration will regard to this young man that no consideration with regard to this young man will influence her. We live in so different a part of town. All our connections are so different, and as you well know, we go out so little that it is very improbable they should meet at all, unless he really comes to see her. So they're gonna wall her away and not even have her go to Netherfield if he comes back. Just be like, no. If he's gonna talk to her, he needs to talk to her. He doesn't even know she's moved house, but he's gonna find out somehow. And that is quite impossible, for he is now in the custody of his friend. And his sisters! I guess what she's saying is he's in Mr. Darcy's house. Maybe that's why she's pinning it more on Mr. Darcy, besides the fact that she hates him, is that he's in Mr. Darcy's house, and so she's like, oh, he's influencing him. Okay. That is quite impossible, for he is now in the custody of his friend, and Mr. Darcy would no more suffer him to call on Jane in such a part of London. My dear aunt, how could you think of it? Mr. Darcy may perhaps have heard of such a place as Gracechurch Street, but he would hardly think of a month's ablution enough to cleanse himself from its impurities. Were he once to enter it, and depend upon it, Mr. Bingley never stirs without him. I like that word, ablution. That's fun to say. So much the better. I hope they will not meet at all. But does not Jane correspond with his sister? She will not be able to help calling. I don't know about that. She will drop the acquaintance entirely. But in spite of the certainty in which Elizabeth affected to place this point, as well as the still more interesting one of Bingley's being withheld from seeing Jane, she felt a solicitude on the subject which convinced her, on examination, that she did not consider it entirely hopeless. It was possible, and sometimes she thought it probable, that his affection might be reanimated, and the influence of his friends successfully combated by the more natural influence of Jane's attractions. Miss Bennet accepted her aunt's invitation with pleasure. The Bingleys were no otherwise in her thoughts at the time than she had hoped that by Caroline's not living in the same house with her brother, she might occasionally spend a morning with her without any danger of seeing him. She does live in the same house as her brother. When do we learn that they didn't live in the same house? Aren't they both visiting Aren't they both visiting Darcy and both living at that house? And B, when they come here, aren't they both living at Netherfield? The Gardiners stayed... Whoa, that's an interesting spelling. The Gardiners stayed a week at Longbourn, and what with the Phillipses and Lucases and the officers, there is not a day without its engagement. Mrs. Bennet had so carefully provided for the entertainment of her brother and sister, they did not once sit down to a family dinner. When the engagement was for home, some of the officers always made part of it, of which officers Mr. Wickham was sure to be one. And on these occasions, Mrs. Gardiner, rendered suspicious by Elizabeth's warm commendation of him, narrowly observed them both, without supposing them, from what she saw, to be very seriously in love. Their preference of each other was plain enough to make her a little uneasy, and she resolved to speak to Elizabeth on the subject before she left Hertfordshire, and represent to her the imprudence of encouraging such an attachment. Ooh, so are we getting the dirt on Wickham now? So she knows something's up with Wickham, that she shouldn't get attached to him. Ooh. To Mrs. Gardiner, Wickham had one means of affording pleasure, unconnected with his general powers. About 10 or a dozen years ago, before her marriage, she had spent a considerable time in that very part of Derbyshire to which he belonged. They had, therefore, many acquaintance in common, And though Wickham had been little there since the death of Darcy's father 5 years before, it was yet in his power to give her fresher intelligence of her former friends than she had been in the way of procuring. Wait, what? So is she saying that, like, he gossips that he, like, she's not, that he's not there very much, and then when he met with her again after not having been there for very long, then he was like, you know that friend of yours, like, yeah, you might not want to hang out with her much anymore, because, like, here's everything that's wrong with her, or stuff like that. So that he's, like, not speaking well of people that he doesn't know anything about. Is that what it's saying? Mrs. Gardiner had seen Pemberley and known the late Mr. Darcy by character perfectly well. Here, consequently, was an inexhaustible subject of discourse. In comparing her recollection of Pemberley with the minute description which Wickham could give, and in bestowing her tribute of praise on the character of its late possessor, she was delighting both him and herself. On being made acquainted with the present Mr. Darcy's treatment of him, she tried to remember something of that gentleman's reputed disposition, when quite a lad, which might agree with it, and was confident at last that she recollected having heard Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy formerly spoken of as a very proud, ill-natured boy. That's his name? His actual name is Fitzwilliam? Like, that's our Mr. Darcy, right? I was not expecting that. I was just expecting a normal name. Like John or something. I guess I wasn't even thinking of, I didn't even remember that we didn't have his first name, because he's just Mr. Darcy to me. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm really confused now, because this paragraph here seems to be saying, okay, like, she sees Wickham and Elizabeth seem to be in love, but it makes her uneasy, and she wants to speak to her before she leaves, and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't get so attached to Wickham. And so it's like, okay, it seems like something's off about Wickham. And then this paragraph, like, seems to be saying, okay, like, I hung out with him, was it as she was a kid? Well, at least it was 10 or a dozen years ago, so we don't know how old she was, but it was 10 or a dozen years ago, before she was married. She was in that part of the place where Darcy and Mr. Wickham lived. And there were people that they both were in acquaintance with. Maybe she's specifically talking about the Darcys when she says that, but there's people that they had in common. Okay, so he wasn't there much since the death of Darcy's father. Okay, yeah, so Darcy's dad dies and Wickham kind of leaves. So 5 years before. So I guess that's 5 years before the 10 years. So 5 years ago, Darcy's dad dies. And then 5 years later, Wickham shows up in Derbyshire. And he's talking crap about the Darcys, I guess. Okay, so, yep, Darcy's father died 5 years before. And it wasn't, he couldn't give them, okay, so I think it is talking about the Darcys specifically. So, like, he was gone for a while, and so he doesn't have new information on the Darcys. He doesn't have new information on the people they both know. She would. And yet, here he is giving her fresh intelligence of their friends that's you know, talking smack about the Darcys. But this could mean, hold on, because it means, okay, it's not in his power to say these things. Like, he doesn't have intelligence, and so he shouldn't be saying this. Like, he's just talking smack to talk smack. Or it means she couldn't procure this knowledge, and so she's like, ooh, thank you for the dirt. I could not procure this knowledge. This is interesting. And then, so, like, he had seen Pemberley, so the Darcy's place, and he knew, oh no, she had seen Pemberley, and she knew that dead dad, she knew his character really well, and they talked a lot about him. And they compare she compares her good recollection of Pemberley with his, not so great, recollection of it. And then he bestows on her praise of the late Mr. Darcy. So he's like, he doesn't know much about them. He doesn't know as much about him as she does. And he is like, oh, he was really great. And she liked that. She's like, oh yeah, that's right. That delights me. That's true. And then they're acquainted with, and then he tells, her how our Mr. Darcy treated him. And she tries to remember what was his disposition when he was young. And then she was like, okay, I recollected hearing that our boy is very proud and ill-natured, which seems to totally contradict what she was saying, because I'm sorry if I'm focusing too much on this, but it seemed like she was saying, oh hey, don't get too close to Mr. Wickham because he's shady. And so I'm looking for, okay, next paragraphs might tell us something about why she doesn't think they should hang out, why she doesn't think they should get together. But then it seems to be saying, no, his story's totally correct. That, yeah, he talks about things that he doesn't have much knowledge about, but yeah, it delights me when he speaks well of the dad, because I thought he was great too. And then he's like, oh, our Mr. Darcy sucks. And she's like, you know what? Maybe he did suck. As I remember him as a kid, yeah. And so it's like, what's wrong? If you think what Mr. Wickham is saying is true, why would you not want them to form an attachment? I really hope this is going to get cleared up in the next chapter, because I'm confused. So does he go by Fitz or William? Good point. It's funny, I like both those names better than them together. I like Fitz as a name, I like William as a name, but I don't know if I like them together. But I am curious if she will pick one of them to call him by in the future. Alright, I want to keep going. I want to find answers. Okay, so this will be 26. Chapter 26. Mrs. Gardner's caution to Elizabeth was punctually and kindly given on the first favorable opportunity of speaking to her alone. After honestly telling her what she thought, she thus went on. I want to know what she honestly thought. What are you saying? Okay. You are too sensible a girl, Lizzie, to fall in love merely because you are warned against it, and therefore am not afraid of speaking openly. Okay. Seriously, I would have you be on your guard. Do not involve yourself, or endeavor to involve him, in any affection which the want of fortune would make you so very imprudent. I have nothing to say against him. He is a most interesting young man, but if he had the fortune he ought to have, I should think you could not do better. But as it is, you must not let your fancy run away with you. You have sense, and we all expect you to use it. Your father would depend on your resolution and good conduct, I am sure. You must not disappoint your father. What? So, okay, so she's saying, you're too sensible a girl to fall in love because you were warned against it. So she's saying, because that is, some people are like that. So, and you can be like, okay, don't fall in love with this person. This person is forbidden. And it's like, now they're forbidden and delicious fruit. I want them more, So she's like, okay, you're not going to do that. I know you well enough. So I can talk to you about this, and it's not going to make your love stronger. So I want you to be on your guard. Don't involve yourself or endeavor to involve Mr. Wickham in the affection which the want of fortune would make you so very imprudent. So I don't know if she's saying, don't involve yourself with him, or if she's saying specifically related to fortune, don't involve yourself. That it's you're in want of a fortune right now, and that could make you imprudent, or that can make your affection imprudent. And she's like, okay, I have nothing to say against Mr. Wickham. He's interesting. And if he had the fortune he ought to have, so she thinks that he ought to have this fortune that Mr. Darcy, I think, is keeping from him. I should think you could not do better. So it's like, okay, like, if he had the fortune, he would be the best match for you. This sounds like not something to be warned against. But as it is, you must not let your fancy run away with you. You have sense, and we all expect you to use it. Your father would depend on your resolution and good conduct, I'm sure. You must not disappoint your father. Like, everything she's saying continues to seem like, she's like, I must warn you. He's a great guy, and he's gonna have an even greater fortune. It's like, what's the warning, then? Mako says, 100% agree. Which part do you agree with? Or just everything I've been talking about lately. Please clear this up as I keep going. My dear aunt, this is being serious indeed. Yes, and I hope to engage you to be serious likewise. Well then, you need not be under any alarm. I will take care of myself and of Mr. Wickham too. You shall not be in love with me if I can prevent it. Why do you want to prevent it? Like, is he... Oh, you're about a minute behind me. Oh, Fitz and William are both better than Fitzwilliam. Gotcha. But, like, so is that on you or on me? Am I lagging a little bit? I mean, if it's a minute, it's okay, but I'm curious about that. But yeah, it's like, she's saying, like, oh, you could get a big head, or it could be, like, you could, you know, fawn over him because of his fortune. She's not doing that. First of all, he doesn't have that fortune right now. And second of all, if you know Elizabeth, you should know that she's not like that. I don't think she would just marry for fortune. If she wanted to do that, she would have married Collins. But she didn't. I don't think she cares about... I mean, she cares about it, of course. But I don't think that that's a reason that she would marry someone. I don't think you need to warn her, like, hey, like, I know, you know, you could pine after him because he's rich, but don't. And it's like, she's not gonna do that. He's not rich right now. Also, that's not that big of a problem in this culture. Like, we just had Charlotte marry Collins, a man that she does not love or even like because of fortune, and people were more mad about her being dumb than about her going after a fortune. Like, they weren't like, oh, you know, she's, like, being dumb for marrying Collins, I mean. That they weren't saying, like, I can't believe that gold digger is marrying for money. Like, no, they were like, Colin sucks and I think less of you for wanting to marry him. That was what everybody said. Nobody, I mean, they were talking about the money in the sense of, oh, now they're gonna want Mr. Bennet to die so that we can have the house. But they didn't seem to be saying, like, oh, you know, I can't believe that she married for fortune. And so even if Elizabeth did marry for, even if Elizabeth did want to marry for fortune, is that a problem right now? Is that something that needs to be warned against? What is the problem? What is the warning? It builds up. I just reloaded. I guess you're saying it's on your end then? Or I don't know which answer that is. I wouldn't marry him even for money. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't understand why this is a problem. What is the warning? Okay, let's keep going. Elizabeth, you are not serious now. I beg your pardon. I will try again. At present, I'm not in love with Mr. Wickham. No, I certainly am not. But he is beyond all comparison the most agreeable man I ever saw. And if he becomes really attached to me, I believe it will be better that he should not. I see the imprudence of it. Oh, that abominable Mr. Darcy. My father's opinion of me does me the greatest honor, and I should be miserable to forfeit it. My father, however, is partial to Mr. Wickham, In short, my dear aunt, I should be very sorry to be the means of making any of you unhappy. But since we see every day that where there is affection, young people are seldom withheld by immediate want of fortune from entering into entanglements with each other, how can I promise to be wiser than so many of my fellow creatures if I am tempted? Or how am I even to know that it would be wisdom to resist? All that I can promise you, therefore, is not to be in a hurry. I will not be in a hurry to believe myself his first object. When I am in company with him, I will not be wishing. In short, I will do my best. Okay. So, interesting to know that she's not in love with him right now. That's curious. But he's the most agreeable man I ever saw. Like, he's a great dude. And everybody agrees. He's a great dude. And nobody has said anything to refute that. And then if he did become attached to me, then it would be better if he didn't. Why? I see the imprudence of it. Why? Not a problem with Mr. Darcy, okay? I think it's all Mr. Darcy's fault, as usual. She does. I mean, my father's opinion of me does me the greatest honor, and I should be miserable to forfeit it. So my father thinks well of Mr. Wickham, wants me to marry him, yeah. Everybody does. Like, what's the problem? In short, my dear, I should be very sorry to be the means of making any of you unhappy. She's the only one who's just expressed displeasure, and that displeasure was not with Mr. Wickham as a choice, as a person. And then since we see every day that where there's affection, young people are seldom withheld by immediate want of fortune from entering into engagements with each other. So where there is affection, so where there is love, young people are not withheld, they don't withhold by immediate want of fortune. So it's like, yeah, I like this person, and I'd also like a fortune. What's the problem if you like the person? The problem with Charlotte is that she doesn't like the person. If you like Wickham, if everybody likes Wickham, isn't it just the bonus that he has money? Why is this imprudent? Like, it would be one thing if this came early on in the book, and like early on somebody was like, oh hey, and, well, let me finish the paragraph and I'll say this afterwards, but or going through the paragraph, like, and so entering engagement, how can I promise to be wiser than so many of my fellow creatures if I'm tempted, or how am I even to know that it would be wisdom to resist? And that's my question. All that I can promise you, therefore, is not to be in a hurry. Okay, that's fair. That's just good advice for whatever. That's just good advice for getting married, no matter what the situation is. And then I will not be in a hurry to believe myself his first object. So she's saying, like, I don't believe that I'm, like, his first pick, necessarily. I'm in company with him, I will not be wishing. I won't be wishing that he would pick me when I'm with him. In short, I will do my best. So, like I was saying, like, it would be one thing if this came early on, and then I would be like, okay, so, like, at this time, or not even at this time, but I would just read it as, like, oh, okay, so if she, like, wants to marry for fortune, she'd be seen as a gold digger, that's imprudent, and we don't want to do that. I'd be like, okay, like, established the boundaries. Literally the first chapter of this book is there's a new eligible bachelor in town, and he's rich, and I want my daughters to marry him. And that has been, most of this book has been about, like, yeah, like, it's great if you can have love, but do it for the money. like that has been the moral of this, of at least Mrs. Bennet's story. And Lizzie has come against that. You know, she has been like, I'm not going to marry Collins for the money. If she was a gold digger, she would have married Collins. She isn't, so she didn't. And like I said, even with the person who kind of is a gold digger, they don't insult her for that. They insult her intelligence and her heart, but not her greed. They don't say she's greedy. And so like, nothing about this book has established that it would be a problem to go after someone for money. So that's already, like, a thing. And then the other thing is, she wouldn't be going after him for money. She likes him. Everybody likes him. He seems like a great dude. And the person who, like, is saying, I need to warn you, there is nothing in the warning that says that he's a bad dude. In fact, she confirms that he's a great dude. And so, if you already like the person, what is the issue? The only issue would be that you're marrying for money and being greedy and you don't actually like this person. That's not happening here. And then it's not even set up as an issue. So what's the problem? Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's continue. Perhaps it will be as well if you discourage his coming here so very often. At least you should not remind your mother of inviting him. Yeah, if you remind your mother of inviting any gentleman caller, she will invite him. As I did the other day, said Elizabeth with a conscious smile. Very true. It will be wise in me to refrain from that. But do not imagine that he is always here so often. It is on your account that he has been so frequently invited this week. You know my mother's ideas as to the necessity of constant company for her friends. But really, and upon my honor, I will try to do what I think to be wisest, and now I hope you are satisfied. Her aunt assured her that she was, and Elizabeth, having thanked her for the kindness of her hints. They parted, a wonderful instance of advice being given on such a point without being resented. Mr. Collins returned to Hertfordshire. Oh, okay. Soon after it had been acquitted by the Gardiners and Jane. But as he took up his abode with the Lucases, okay, at least he's not with them. He's like, that would be Longbourn. He took up his abode with the Lucases. His arrival was no great inconvenience to Mrs. Bennet. His marriage was now fast approaching, and she was at length so far resigned as to think it inevitable, and even repeatedly to say in an ill-natured tone that she... Oh, wait, hold on. I think I lost something. Go back. Okay. Said that she wished they might be happy. Thursday was to be the wedding day, and on Wednesday Miss Lucas paid her farewell visit. When she rose to take leave, Elizabeth, ashamed of her mother's ungracious and reluctant good wishes, and sincerely affected herself, accompanied her out of the room. As they went downstairs together, Charlotte said, "I shall depend on hearing from you very often, Eliza." "That you certainly shall. And I have another favour to ask. Will you come and see me? We shall often meet, I hope, in Hertfordshire. I am not likely to leave Kent for some time. Promise me, therefore, to come to Hunsford." Elizabeth could not refuse, though she foresaw little pleasure in the visit. Yeah. Maybe it's a warning about rushing into a marriage when she doesn't need to. He's a good choice, but don't rush into being a wife. That would make more sense, that especially if right after what just happened with Collins, it would make more sense if it's not about, like, oh, don't be a gold digger. It's more, don't rush into things. That's fair. It still is a little confusing because it's like, that's also kind of been the point, is like, let's get married fast as you can. And I guess maybe they are just coming against the culture by saying this and being like, yeah, I know your mom really wants you to get married, and in a lot of ways the culture really wants you to get married really fast. But don't do that. Then again, it kind of goes back to the imprudence thing, that it's like, that feels like a cultural thing. That feels like, hey, I'm saying if you do this, if you marry him, it might look imprudent. And that's like a cultural norm and etiquette sort of thing. And so if it's like, it seems like the culture wants them to get married as fast as possible. And so it doesn't seem like it would be imprudent in the culture's eyes to rush into things. But nonetheless, out of all the potential options for what she might be saying, that absolutely makes the most sense. If she's just saying, hey, don't rush into things like Charlotte Lucas did. My father and Maria are to come to me in March, added Charlotte, and I hope you will consent to be of the party. Indeed, Eliza, you will be as welcome to me as either of them. The wedding took place. Okay, no big thing. The wedding just took place. The wedding took place. The bride and bridegroom set off for Kent from the church door, and everybody had as much to say or to hear on the subject as usual. Elizabeth soon heard from her friend. Their correspondence was as regular and frequent as it had ever been. That it should be equally unreserved was impossible. Elizabeth could never address her without feeling that all the comfort of intimacy was over, and though determined not to slacken as a correspondent, it was for the sake of what had been, rather than what was. Charlotte's first letters were received with a good deal of eagerness. There could not but be curiosity to know how she would speak of her new home, how she would like Lady Catherine, and how happy she would dare pronounce herself to be. Though, when the letters were read, Elizabeth felt that Charlotte expressed herself on every point exactly as she might have foreseen. She wrote cheerfully, seemed surrounded with comforts, and mentioned nothing which she could not praise. The house, furniture, neighbourhood, and roads were all to her taste, and Lady Catherine's behaviour was most friendly and obliging, as Mr. Collins's picture of Hunsford and Rosings rationally softened. Elizabeth perceived that she must wait for her own visit there to know the rest. Jane had already written a few lines to her sister to announce their safe arrival in London. When she wrote again, Elizabeth hoped it would be in her power to say something of the Bingleys. Oh, okay, I don't think I quite connected that the Gardiners live in London, and so when she was saying Jane can come with us, it is to the same place that the Bingleys are at. Okay. That might mean that we missed some drama, though. I want to like be there when she talks to the sisters or Mr. Bingley. We're probably down just gonna hear it in a letter. But anyway, so this is interesting about the letters. So, I was about to say about their correspondence was as regular and frequent as it had ever been. I was like, yeah, she needs you now more than ever. But I guess her letters are either truthfully or falsely making it seem like she doesn't. I am curious about that. I am curious if she's like, hey, actually, you know what? Life's pretty good. And I thought that he wasn't that agreeable, but you know what? He kind of is. Especially because I get nice furniture and stuff. Or if she's just like, yeah, Mr. Collins has rotted your little brain, and you are now talking like him, only slightly more rationally, and I need to see for myself. Yeah, it's very hard to tell if this is fake or real, and I am curious to have Elizabeth go over there and see what's true. Now I'm just imagining, like we go over there and all the plants are rotted and the sky is red and black and it's just this horrible place. And they're like, yeah, it's great over here. And then Lady Catherine is some evil overlord. Oh my goodness. Her impatience for the second letter was as well rewarded as impatience generally is. Not well rewarded? That's fun. Jane had been a week in town without either seeing or hearing from Caroline. She accounted for it, however, by supposing that her last letter to her friend from Longbourn had been, by some accident, been lost. Oh, Jane, you're just so sweet. She probably just doesn't want to talk to you. She doesn't like you. My aunt, she continued, is going tomorrow into that... Oh, that's a letter. That part of town, and I shall take the opportunity of calling in Grosvenor Street. She wrote again when the visit was paid, and she had seen Miss Bingley. Okay. I did not think Caroline in spirits, were her words, but she was very glad to see me. I think that those negative spirits might have been upon seeing you. And reproach me for giving her no notice of my coming to London. Mm-hmm. I was right, therefore. My last letter had never reached her. I inquired her of their brother, of course. He was well, but so much engaged with Mr. Darcy that they scarcely ever saw him. I found that Miss Darcy was expected to dinner.
I wish I could see her. My visit was not long, as Caroline and Mrs. Hurst were going out. I dare say I shall soon see them here.
Elizabeth shook her head over this letter. It convinced her that accident only could discover to Mr. Bingley her sister's being in town. Hold on. Oh, she's saying, like, I guess she's saying, like, only through accident can Mr. Bingley figure out Jane's in town, but, like, Miss Bingley could tell her, even if they don't talk that much. I don't know. 4 weeks passed away, and Jane saw nothing of him. She endeavored to persuade herself that she did not regret it, but she could no longer be blind to Miss Bingley's inattention. After waiting at home every morning for a fortnight, and inventing every evening a fresh excuse for her, the visitor did at last appear, but the shortness of her stay, and yet more the alteration of her manner, would allow Jane to deceive herself no longer. The letter which she wrote on this occasion to her sister will prove what she felt. Nice. Okay. My dearest Lizzie will, I am sure, be incapable of triumphing in her better judgment at my expense, when I confess myself to have been entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. There we go. Truth is coming out. But my dear sister, though the event has proved you right, do not think me obstinate if I still assert that, considering what her behaviour was, my confidence was as natural as your suspicion. I do not at all comprehend her reason for wishing to be intimate with me, but if the same circumstances were to happen again, I'm sure I should be deceived again. So she's saying if she does it again, she's going to be deceived again? What? Okay. Oh, I guess she's saying just if we were to redo the past, like, I would be equally deceived. Like, nothing about her, how she acted with me seemed like a deception. Okay. Caroline did not return my visit till yesterday, and not a note, not a line did I receive in the meantime. When she did come, it was very evident that she had no pleasure in it. She made a slight formal apology for not calling before, said not a word of wishing to see me again, and was in every respect so altered a creature that when she went away, I was perfectly resolved to continue the acquaintance no longer. I pity, though I cannot help blaming her. She was very wrong in singling me out as she did. I can safely say that every advance to intimacy began on her side. But I pity her, because she must feel that she has been acting wrong, and because I am very sure that anxiety for her brother is the cause of it. I need not explain myself farther, and though we know this anxiety to be quite needless, yet if she feels it, it will easily account for her behaviour to me, and so deservedly dear as he is to his sister, whatever anxiety she may feel on his behalf is natural and amiable. I cannot but consider, however, at her having any such fears now, because if he had at all cared about me, we must have met long ago. He knows of my being in town, I'm certain, from something she said herself, and yet it should seem by her manner of talking as if she wanted to persuade herself that he is really partial to Miss Darcy. I was gonna say, you know you're deceived by her, and this is coming from her mouth, so you might still be deceived in that too. But she's still being sweet and being like, you know what, I think it's because she's anxious about her brother, and you know what, I get that. And it's like, I still think you're giving her too much benefit of the doubt. I cannot understand it. If I were not afraid of judging harshly, I should be almost tempted to say there is a strong appearance of duplicity in all this. I mean, you just said you were deceived. Yeah, there is duplicity. But I will endeavour to banish every painful thought, and think only of what will make me happy, your affection, and the invariable kindness of my dear aunt and uncle, or uncle and aunt. Let me hear from you very soon. Miss Bingley said something of his never returning to Netherfield again, of giving up the house, but not with any certainty. We had better not mention it. I'm extremely glad that you have such pleasant accounts from our friends at Hunsford. Pray, go to see them, with Sir William and Maria. I am sure you'll be very comfortable there. Yours, Jane. Is that a... I was about to say, is that a J and a C, but their last name doesn't start with a C. What does that mean? What are these symbols, Jane? Now I'm just imagining, like, Jane, you know, this super sweet lady in the 1800s, and just, like, yours, and then the eldritch noises from when you're trying to do incantations and sucker for love. Yours. This letter gave Elizabeth some pain, but her spirits returned as she considered that Jane would no longer be duped, by the sister at least. All expectation from the brother was now absolutely over. She would not even wish for any renewal of his attentions. His character sunk on every review of it, and as a punishment for him, as well as a possible advantage to Jane, she seriously hoped he might really soon marry Mr. Darcy's sister. By Wickham's account, she would make him abundantly regret what he had thrown away. Why would that be an advantage to Jane? Or a punishment to him? I guess because she doesn't like Darcy. I don't know what Wickham's account has to do with this. I guess it's just, like, by Wickham's account, like, they're gonna swindle you. Like, I guess she's lumping the sister in with Mr. Darcy. And being like, yeah, you're gonna get swindled if you marry her, kind of thing. That's poor. Like, I don't think that. So I think Mr. Bingley does love Jane. I think he did before. I think he still does. Because we have only heard from Miss Bingley. We have heard nothing from him. And so even Miss Bingley being like, you know what? Yeah, he totally knows that you're here and he's not coming to see you. I can't trust that. I'm not gonna trust that. He can, like, I totally think that, like, at the very least, he is ignorant, if not being actively deceived. Like, she might, his sister might be actively feeding him misinformation. But even if not, I think he just doesn't know. He doesn't know that she's in town and stuff. And, like, it is, like I said before, it isn't great that he's not writing to her. Like, he should write to her. That's part of the potential idea that she could be deceiving him on multiple levels. Like, it could just be, hey, I know you like that Jane girl, but she doesn't like you, and here's why, you know, kind of thing. I'm her friend, I know. But yeah, like, I am not ready to give up hope on Mr. Bingley. I am not ready to for my opinion of him to sink. I still think that he likes her, and we have not heard anything from him, and so I cannot make any judgment on that. Other than that. Other than we haven't heard anything from him, which is slightly concerning. Yeah, so I just have this image of, like, everybody's, like, going through the 5 stages of grief out here, and Jane is, like, going over to London to try and get him to come see her and all these different things, and poor man's just, like, sitting there having tea and cakes and doesn't even know all this is going on. He's just like, I'm so looking forward to seeing Jane again this summer. Okay, Mrs. Gardiner, about this time, reminded Elizabeth of her promise concerning that gentleman, and required information. Elizabeth had such to send as might rather give contentment to her aunt than to herself. His apparent partiality had subsided. His attentions were over. He was the admirer of someone else. Mood? I'm so looking forward to seeing Jane this summer. He's an admirer of someone else. Elizabeth was watchful enough to see it all, but she could see it and write it without material pain. Her heart had been but slightly touched, and her vanity was satisfied with believing that she would have been his only choice had fortune permitted it. What do you mean, fortune? You withdrew. It's not about fortune. The sudden acquisition of £10,000 was the most remarkable charm of the young lady to whom he was now rendering himself agreeable. Oh, okay, I think I get it now. There's a difference between this situation and everything else that's been in the book. Even Lucas. With Bingley and with Collins, they didn't come into the fortune. They already were rich. They already were well off. And with Collins, it is a promise in the future, but it's not something he has now. So the thing with Mr. Wickham is that he is going to get that fortune. And so it's this idea of suddenly he gets this fortune, and then it looks bad. It looks bad that this young lady is like, oh, I'd like to marry you. Because it seems like she's a gold digger. It seems like it's just about the money. Because of that distinction, because he just got it, not because he always had it. I don't think it's that, like, I think you can equally be a gold digger if somebody has had this money, you know, since the beginning versus if they just got it. But I do get it now. I do think that that's why it looks imprudent culturally, is because he just got it. But I am feeling like I missed something, because wasn't the fortune, didn't that have to do with Darcy? Like, or was that a job? Was it like Darcy's dad promised him a job and he didn't get to have that? Or was it like, I promised you some of my will and you don't get it? And so how did he come into that fortune? Do any of you remember? Or was it said? Okay. That cleared a lot up. Okay. The sudden acquisition of £10,000 was the most remarkable charm of the young lady to whom he was now rendering himself agreeable. But Elizabeth, less clear-sighted perhaps in his case than in Charlotte's, did not quarrel with him for his wish of independence. Nothing, on the contrary, could be more natural, and while able to suppose that it cost him a few struggles to relinquish her, she was ready to allow it a wise and desirable measure for both, and could very sincerely wish him happy. All this was acknowledged to Mrs. Gardiner, and after relating the circumstances, she thus went on. "I am now convinced, my dear aunt, that I have never been much in love, for had I really experienced that pure and elevating passion, I should at present detest his very name, and wish him all manner of evil. But my feelings are not only cordial towards him, they are even impartial towards Miss King. I cannot find out that I hate her at all, or that I am in the least unwilling to think her a very good sort of girl. There can be no love in all of this. My watchfulness has been effectual, and though I should certainly be a more interesting object to all my acquaintance, were I distractedly in love with him, I cannot say that I regret my comparative insignificance. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. Kitty and Lydia take his defection much more to heart than I do. They are young in the ways of the world, and not yet open to the mortifying conviction that handsome young men must have something to live on, as well as the plain." Yeah, man gets inheritance, women standing up like meerkats. Money? 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 Yep, yeah, I think that is exactly the vibe. Okay, so hang on a sec. So I am really interested in this topic, and I do think it's going to make it real fun when she's actually in love with Mr. Darcy, because they are setting up that she's never actually been in love before. And it is curious, because this is definitely not a love at first sight story. And so it is going to be interesting to see, how does she actually fall in love with him? What does it for her? So I am really curious about that. I do think that is quite juicy that they're putting that in there. That I think I get a little bit confused. So she says my watchfulness has been effectual, and I think she's just saying like, oh yeah, like if I hadn't been watching myself, I might have fallen in love with him. But she did say she wasn't in love with him at the time of the warning. Let's see. But so, and though I should certainly be a more interesting object to all my acquaintance. So she's saying, like, I'm kind of the best, and I should be more interesting than Miss King. And then, were I distractedly in love with him, like, were I in love with him, but, like, in the back of my head, you know, distractedly. I cannot say that I regret my comparative insignificance. So it's like, if maybe I was in love with him a little bit, like, I don't regret that I was kind of insignificant in his journey, I guess. Yeah, you're right. It is enemies to lovers. That is true. It isn't love at first sight, but it is a different trope. Then importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. I'm confused because, like, I guess she's saying, like, oh, like, Kitty and Lydia think that I was really important, but, you know, I wasn't. But, like, importance and dearly are kind of synonyms. They're kind of the same thing. So, and I don't know what that means by, like, not open to the mortifying conviction that handsome young men must have something to live on as well as the plain. Like, is that saying, like, the farm that you get your money from? Like, if you get your money from your crops, like, you need something more to live on? I don't know. Very hungry, says Death said. I'll be back with food if you're still streaming. Very fair. It was great to have you. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Okay, give me a second, because I think it's dinner time for me too, but let me go ask. Okie dokie. Yep, it is indeed my dinner time. Let's do. Or maybe it means as well as what is plain. Like, instead of, like, a literal plain, it's saying, like, handsome gonna have something to live on as well as what is plain. I'm still confused by that, though. Like, I don't know if that's saying men have urges, Kitty and Lydia, but this book does not seem to be about that. It hasn't mentioned that before, and so it would feel odd to me if it's saying, like, oh, those sweet summer children don't know about the urges of men. You know, I don't think it's saying that, but I can't figure out what it's saying. But anyways, it has been lovely. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. This did boost my mood and my energy as I hoped it would. So not our usual writing group stream, but I hope you had fun nonetheless. Do we have anybody to quick raid, or shall I just sign off? Let's do. Yeah, I'll wait a little bit, and if I don't hear anything, I'll just head off. Well, I'm not gonna watch, so just sign off, I think. Fair enough. But yes, I will see you all later. I hope you have a lovely time until the next time I see you. Oh, I forgot to say at the beginning, I am gonna do more Dracula, or at least I plan to. There have been two. Couldn't even snooze that one. There have been two. I guess because I was talking. But there have been two Dracula days that happened while I was. I was supposed to say while I was away. I haven't been away, but just there have been two. And I think I'm gonna wait until around the 28th, because I know there's one on the 28th, and I'll just do them all at that time. But yeah, so I did see that. So don't worry. I did see the emails. There is more Dracula to read. I think I'm just gonna save that. I felt more in the mood for Pride and Prejudice. I think they're pretty short, the two that have come out, and so I want to wait until I have a little more material to read. But that is the danger of reading ahead, because I think I messed up the order. I think I read ahead in Jonathan's and didn't read Lucy's letter that we're at. Anywho, so one day soon we will be doing that. Anywho, I hope you have a good evening. I will see you when I see you. Bye-bye.